Hello, my friends, and welcome to another fabulous day with the TFL Talk crew. Today, we're going to be covering one topic, but we're going to break it into a couple pieces, and that's specifically about the brand new Tacoma. Now, I know before you say anything...
What?
Tacoma, yes, everybody's talking Tacoma, everybody's talking Tacoma. Actually, a lot of people are talking Cybertruck as well, which we're not doing this time. But because we were lucky enough to be one of the first, at least in our area, to get our hands on one, we had the opportunity to live with it. So we're going to talk about day-to-day life with the Toyota Tacoma and...
The new one.
Brand new one.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about the competition. That's kind of in the second half of the show. Because we have a unique insight with the vehicle as opposed to just simply driving it for a couple of days. We really put miles in it. We drove the hell out of it. And also we're going to talk about our Patreon friends. And I think that's pretty, and a little bit of news.
And a little bit of happy holidays, guys. I mean, we are in that season still.
We are indeed.
And New Year's Eve is coming up just a day away.
Yeah, by the time you guys see this, it will be a day. I'm preparing for it personally. I've got a lot of nog that I'm about to prepare. So, yeah, I'm heavy on the nog.
So, yes, happy holidays. Hope you're enjoying your time off. And we're not taking any time off for this podcast because we want to bring you the latest news.
That is correct. So, we are going to be here for the duration talking about the Tacoma and some news. All right?
Yes.
So, let's hit it.
So, thirst?
Yes.
First.
Actually, that's a good point. I should bring out my coffee and start sipping away.
Are you thirsty?
Yeah, always.
No, I wanted to thank some of our Patreon supporters, like we always do. Patreon.com/TFL Cars, our only page up there. And recently, Sam Peed. Thank you, Sam.
That's an awesome name.
Sam has a question, but it has to do with heavy-duty pickup trucks. And this show, so I want to save this question. Yes, it has to do with some diesel-powered Ram trucks, and there is a lot of really questionable stuff happening there.
That is true. And we've covered it.
Yeah, so check out oltfl.com. Mm-hmm. So we're going to leave that off a little bit until we have more information. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Sam, and thank you to all of our other supporters through this holiday season. We really appreciate it.
Okay, now a little bit of news. For those of you who don't know, I'm bald. I know it's a shock, but there's a reason why this is important. I feel that the need for sunroofs is a little overblown nowadays. I enjoy fresh air, mind you. You know me, I drive with the windows open off, and it's not just because I'm gassy. But I really do enjoy fresh air. However, I've been noticing that a lot of people who I've been talking to, both on Twitter, X, and other media, they've said the same things. Why do I have to get a truck with a panoramic sunroof? It doesn't make any sense. I just want a regular truck. But these packages that they're putting together are forcing me to get this panoramic sunroof. And
I see.
You know what I mean? And so like they want like this, the surf and turf, but they don't want the sunroof. And the question was, does the sunroof affect efficiency? And it's an interesting question because sunroofs are heavier than your regular steel roof. We know that. So I wanted to see whether or not Andre would be willing to tear out a sunroof in a vehicle after we do a first loop and then, see what happens. But he's going to say no.
Which vehicle? Well, first of all, the Tacoma we have has a sunroof.
But it's not a panoramic one.
No, it's a traditional smaller one.
Still, that adds weight.
Yes.
A little bit.
Definitely adds weight because there's a mechanism up there to move it up, close and open
there's
it.
Tracks, and the glass itself is probably heavier than the sheet metal that it replaces.
And it has to be shatterproof. What if the vehicle rolls over? It has to be safe.
Right.
Yes. So that's a really good question, but I'm not going to remove the sunroof for you.
Okay. Well, sorry, guys, he won't play along. But I will say this. If we ever get an opportunity to get a truck that has the sunroof package and one that doesn't have the sunroof package or panoramic and blah, 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 we will definitely note that, and perhaps we can do one of our 50-mile loops and see if there's a difference. But the bottom line comes down to weight. It's not going to be aerodynamics. It's not much of an aero difference. I would imagine it's going to be weight. And so that can be simulated.
Yeah, and that's probably would be very, very minimal.
I don't think it's going to be
the whole difference.
Yeah.
But we have done an MPG loop with the Tacoma.
That's where I was going with this.
Oh,
yes,
I see where
yes,
I'm almost picking up what you're laying down.
Thank you. I appreciate that, bro. Yes, so this leads me to what we did recently do with the Toyota Tacoma, the brand new one. You may notice if you're able to watch this, the Toyota Tacoma that we drove, which is exactly the same one that's behind us, at least image-wise,
Yeah.
has a giant chin spoiler. It is huge. It makes Leno's chin look
Well,
small.
didn't you measure it? You actually got out tape, measuring tape, and you measured it between 7 and 8 inches long, depending on where you measure.
Right, because it tapers upwards. This thing is ginormous, but it's effective because if you watch the video, you will see there is a difference between having the chin spoiler on and off in terms of aero. But I got to tell you, in terms of looks, take it off. Just remove it.
So it's a weird thing, right? So when Toyota initially announced and revealed the new Tacoma, this was in Hawaii, they actually put several images online, and every trim of the new Tacoma had a chin.
Right.
So there was a little bit of a pushback because even though we all love efficiency,
Yeah,
right,
sure.
we don't like, it looks odd. It just looks out of place a little bit.
It almost looks like an afterthought, doesn't it? It doesn't look like it's part of the design. And in addition, one of the things that we do at TFL is we go off-road. And the other thing we do is we drive through snow. And both of those things are not conducive
Well, some people called it snowplow.
when you have a snowplow, exactly.
So then, this was in May when they first showed it in 2023.
Right.
Then when the truck came out, closer to November, when we were actually able to drive it for the first time, certain models did not have a chin spoiler. For example, TRD Off-Road didn't have it.
Which makes sense.
Yes, and some others. So Toyota said, we did the calculations because they're still submitting their data to the government for certification, right?
Right.
And they said, well, for some of them, we still want the chin. For some of them, we don't. And I think it's because they read some of your comments and they saw some of the pushback as far as aesthetics, right? How it looks.
Yeah.
Especially on off-road models.
Yes, and you guys actually were effective. Think about it this way: they do watch and read what goes on with YouTube, with on the internet, what Apple plays and what have you. So your feedback matters, and this is a really good example of that. However, they're still doing the giant chin spoiler on a lot of their vehicles.
So what we wanted to figure out, we actually wanted to remove it. First of all, figure out how to remove it and how fast you can remove it. And also run 2 MPG loops, which we just did.
Yep.
And you could see it once again. alltfl.com is an aggregate of everything we do. So we do have 8 channels and 3 websites and
just
podcasts.
a lot of stuff that comes through.
But it's an aggregate, so it's not really a search engine, right? So you could see the last week of stuff pretty easily. But if you want to dig deeper, we would recommend you go directly to YouTube or even our website.
Or go to tfltruck.com.
Yeah. And then you can dig down and search some of the history on that topic.
After about a week to 10 days, stuff gets booted out because more stuff's coming in. I mean, us, we keep putting out more and more stuff. So
we did it. So and originally, the engineering team at Toyota said it's 9 bolts. And, well, we've been fed similar lines before by other manufacturers, right?
Which have been either really accurate or extremely inaccurate.
Yeah, so we wanted to put it to the test.
Yep.
And so even Tommy also put this Tacoma on a lift. We really went to town on this truck because, Tommy had it for slip test. He published that video as well. He took it into Andre's pit.
Yep.
He tested it there. He put it on a lift. He looked underneath the truck because it has a brand new chassis.
Fully boxed, by the way.
Yes. And it was very easy to remove the chin.
Yes. So we don't want to go into too many details of the video, but fortunately, Andre was willing to get down in the dirt while I stared at him and timed him. I actually timed him using my phone, just to see how long it took for him to remove it. Now, if I recall, you were using a 10 millimeter socket.
Right. And I brought a power tool with me.
So, I mean, yeah, it wasn't a hand.
Which is what guys do. We love power tools.
Hell yeah, I would have done the same thing. However, if you're on the trail and there's a good chance you would just have a regular socket set. So I would probably double the time if you have a socket set, but it was still not very long. And 9 bolts later, he was able to pull that off. Also, you could do it with a Phillips screwdriver, I believe, too.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
So simple tool, actually, you can remove it.
Yeah, and there's 2 that are inboard by the tires on each side, but then the rest of them are actually out front, in front of, like underneath the license plate, essentially, where that would go.
On the leading edge,
Yeah,
and it's very easy.
he could do it with his long, ungainly arms.
And I'm not even like Alex or Case. I'm not mechanically, great.
Well, Alex and Case can both, they're like little spider monkeys. They can
Yes.
get in anywhere and wrench on anything. So
Yes.
anyway, and yeah, once again, I timed it, which is a valuable tool as well. The bottom line here is that I want to make this very clear. We're not going to go into the actual numbers from that test. You guys can watch it, but it didn't drive any differently as far as I could tell.
No, and there was no noticeable sound. Like it's not like aerodynamic device that either adds sound or
Right.
removes sound. So we didn't notice any cabin noise differences. But I did notice one thing when we arrived back at our headquarters after removing the chin and driving on our highway loop. The two bolts next to each wheel in the front, I believe they have to be inserted back into the position after you remove the chin because they're also holding part of the shroud for the wheel well liner. So after you remove the chin,
So we screwed up.
a little bit. I screwed up a little bit.
Okay.
So after you remove the chin, it would be wise to put those bolts back in.
Right, because you got that little flap there that holds part of the wheel well inserts.
Liner, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really important as well. So
Yeah.
we're still learning.
Yeah, we are.
So
But I don't think that caused anything. I didn't hear any flapping.
No, there
or
was no
anything.
rubbing. There was no noise differences. There was no, and so, but I do gotta say, the difference between having it off and on was small.
Yeah.
And so it would make sense if you're prudent, if you are owning this truck for many years, it would be prudent for you to have it, because you can get that small benefit of efficiency.
Yeah, especially if you're a commuter and you do long distance.
But I think most people might remove it actually.
That would be the first thing. I don't think I'd even leave the dealership with it on, to be honest with you. And that's how much I dislike it visually.
So it's the difference is small.
Yeah, but I understand why Toyota did this. And there's a bottom line here. Other automakers are doing exactly the same thing. Ford's doing it with their large trucks, especially the heavy duties. Have you seen some of the chin spoilers they have?
Yeah.
They're huge too.
Like Super Duty has a big,
Huge.
maybe even the same size as this.
It might be the same size as that, but it's wider, obviously,
Yes.
because it's on a Super Duty. So, yeah, let's talk about...
Here's the other thing.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to bring up. Other full-size pickups like F-150s and some Ram 1500s have actually movable chins.
Yeah.
So when the chin is retracted, it's the air dam basically that comes down from underneath the front bumper or gets retracted back up. But mid-size trucks like the Tacoma, the space is at the premium, right?
Yes. And plus, you add weight when you have the complexity of servos that are making something go down and up, plus that needs a little track or something like that. You're going to add weight.
Yeah, and learning about the new Tacoma, even the front sway bar and the disconnectable front sway bar in some off-road models, it actually goes behind the rear wheels,
Yes.
not in front of it, and like in some full-size trucks, because they're trying to package so many things.
They're space limited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why it's not movable. I mean, if it was active chin, it would probably be a different story.
So now let's talk about driving it on a daily basis, driving it long distance, which we've done all of that. The only thing we haven't done with it, and a little bit of an elephant in the room, we'll just address it now, is we haven't towed with it. We will tow with the Tacoma very soon, just not this one.
Because we're buying one too.
That's correct.
Yes.
It's convoluted. We had to decide what we were spending time with, and so that's why we did all these tests with this truck, so we could pack everything in a very small amount of time.
And it's also holiday season, so not everybody is here. When we don't have the full team.
It's empty right now. There's like nobody around
Why were you the only ones here?
because we're suckers. Yeah.
No, we're dedicated to you guys.
We're
the audience.
we're dedicated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, before we talk about daily driving, because we did also drag racing, daily driving, we did a lot with this truck.
Yes, we did.
I want to thank two more people really quick. So Scott Power also helped us out and donated a little bit on
Thank you,
patreon.com/TFL
Scott.
Car. So Scott, really appreciate your support. And also Tyga donated something. And Tyga, Tygah. So thank you, Tyga.
Tyga, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So now let's talk about our drag racing experience, because we did have to drive a lot in order to accomplish this as well.
Yes, we did. So one of the things that many of you guys have been curious about is whether or not the new, was it a 2.4 liter? The 2.4 liter turbo can hold up against, say, other turbos. Because as you guys know, Many vehicles out there are moving towards turbocharging. Just a few years back, it would have been crazy to say that Toyota would be turbocharged, but it'd also be crazy to say that everything GM's building that's midsize is turbocharged. Guess what? They all are now. And Ford, yes, they were one of the early adopters to small displacement turbocharged engines.
Yes.
And we've proven before that the Ford Ranger is fast and can tow really well for a little truck. But unfortunately, we didn't have a current Ranger to compete directly against it. But we did have a current Chevy Colorado compete against it.
Yeah, and here's the thing about the Ranger. I looked, right? So one of our buddies, actually Alex's friend, has a modified Ranger. We didn't really want a modified Ranger for some comparisons because it's modified. It was lifted with bigger tires.
Yeah, so if it didn't win the race, then you guys would have obviously, especially Ford fans, would say, well, it's no fair. It's lifted and more drag.
And it's not stock, right? Also, sometimes we have access to some used vehicles at dealerships, some of our friendly dealerships around here, and I couldn't find one. Actually, they're so rare right now. I found one that was two-wheel drive only. Mm-hmm. That's once again not fair because the height is a little bit different.
Yeah, it's not as heavy.
And it's lighter.
Yeah, and there's not as much drag. So unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. However, this is what we did do. We did get a previous generation Toyota Tacoma.
Old versus new.
Was it a TRD?
It was a TRD off-road, so not quite apples to apples because the new Tacoma we have right now in the press loan is a limited luxury model, right? Mm-hmm. So we did have a TRD off-road 3rd gen. Of course, the brand new 2024 4th gen. And then my Chevy Colorado.
Yep.
And then another truck came out.
That's right. A special surprise. Should we talk about it?
Yeah, let's do it.
So that was a 1st gen Tacoma, but it wasn't a normal one, not even close. Small bed, small cab, the smallest version you can possibly get of it.
Little tiny guy.
But it had a 3.4 liter V6 that was highly modified with a supercharger.
Yeah, brand new Magnuson supercharger actually. And I say brand new, not like it was purchased recently. It was actually a new design, next generation Magnuson supercharger.
Right.
And our friend John brought it out. And actually John, we worked together with John with his truck
in the past
years ago too. And his truck, when we saw him this week for the drag race, had 765,000 miles,
which is impressive. And the truck looks almost brand new.
Yes, it's a 1997. I mean, it's 27 years or so, almost. And here's the thing: it's not the original engine. Right, because we want to be open about this.
Absolutely.
Right? Because if it was, and that engine was supercharged all of its life, this would be just incredible, right?
Yep.
But the original engine, the head gasket went at 480,000 miles.
That's all.
Being supercharged also.
Right.
Yes. And then instead of replacing the head gasket, John thought about it and he said, why don't I just get another engine?
Right.
So he did get a used engine, same thing, 3.4 liter V6 with 100,000 miles. He pulled it out of somewhere. It was relatively affordable, actually.
Right.
And now he, since then, put another 300,000+ miles on it. So he almost has two engines with like 400,000 miles plus on each, both supercharged.
Now, I had a Tacoma with a 3.4 liter V6, and it's no freight train. And on top of that, it's not very efficient. It was replaced by, frankly, a better engine, the 4 liter. But that 3.4 liter, bulletproof, really strong.
Well, I think that's the whole story behind it, is that, and I asked John actually, what about the rear axle? Is that original? He said, yes. So a lot of the driveline is original.
Right.
Of course, the frame and the rest of the truck is original.
Yep.
Wow, that's a testament to how much extra margins, right, for capability that the truck has.
But let's quickly talk about its numbers before we move back to the new Tacoma. And that is, the vehicle weighs, 3,400 pounds? It's not very heavy.
It's a little guy, 4-wheel drive, but still, I don't even know how much it weighs, but not very much.
It's not a lot.
No.
It's in the 3,000 pound zone, yet it's putting out over 300 horsepower.
Yeah, at the wheels,
yes.
and close to 400 pound-feet of torque. So it's problematic to drive because it just wants to spin its tires right off.
Yeah, and we actually have some video of Andre doing exactly that. Fortunately, we got a chance to, of course, play with that and race it and all that other stuff, and it was cool. But the most important thing was how the Tacoma, new one, performed in the drag racing. And I can comfortably say that, yes, it is quicker than the V6. It damn well better be, because you guys would not be satisfied if it was equal to it. So it is a little bit faster, especially up here at high elevation. Remember, we are over a mile above sea level in certain spots where we test, and that racetrack is a mile above sea level. And if you have a vehicle that is naturally or normally or whatever you want to call it in terms of its induction, there's no induction. It is just regularly aspirated, naturally aspirated, whatever.
Sure.
And it's at a major disadvantage because it's losing quite a bit of its horsepower at high elevation.
So the air density is about 17% less. So, it's not, directly linear how it affects the power, but it is losing considerable amount of power.
Yeah, and some people say that every 2,500 feet you lose 3% or something like that is what one person put out there. But that's not the same across the board. Some cars handle it differently than other cars depending on fuel injection and how they run. And also, obviously, whether or not they're turbocharged. Turbocharged vehicles, supercharged vehicles are at an advantage at high elevation. Hence, that Toyota Tacoma did still lose some power, but nowhere near as much as the V6 Tacoma did.
Yeah, and of course it has an 8-speed automatic. The new truck has a different transmission.
Yep.
Has a slightly different rear axle ratios, and of course transmission gearing ratios as well.
It certainly shifts better than the old one, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it just has more breadth. So the old V6, by old I mean the previous gen, the third generation Tacoma, and the 6-speed automatic that it's made it to, I think it's clear now. I think most people agree, and we agree as well. It's not the best pairing. Actually, I love the old manual transmission Tacoma as well.
I do too.
Because you could just have it in more kind of the ratio you want it to be in, right?
Right.
And the V6 and the 6-speed older transmission was hunting a bit for gears. The new one doesn't hunt.
No.
The new one, I think they nailed this one.
It has a completely different personality, and we got to drive it on wide open highways and also through city streets and back roads. And it never put a foot wrong. It never seemed like it was struggling to find a gear, and it would just very lightly change gears, so you didn't feel anything jarring. I mean, I never felt anything jarring, not even once.
Yeah, it's pretty smooth. And of course, the main question I think a lot of people have: why not 10 speeds? Right?
You have the answer.
I do, because I asked Toyota this.
Exactly.
Because the Ranger has 10 speeds.
Yes.
A lot of half-ton trucks have 10 speeds, including the Tundra.
Correct. Which is actually strange. I thought that they would share that with the Tundra, but that Tundra, just the physical bulk of that transmission is very different than what they wanted.
And that's a big reason why. It's actually the 10-speed automatic is actually a little bit longer. And every inch counts here. This is a mid-sized truck.
Right.
And also, as far as the gearing is concerned, and I'm sure, of course, Toyota doesn't want to disclose every detail, right?
Yeah.
Because it's competitive advantages for manufacturers. But I'm assuming for this size of truck and the volume, because they need to build a lot of these.
Yes.
They sold almost 250,000 Tacomas this year. We're going to do more numbers when the final numbers come out.
Right.
But the volume of the transmission and also reliability of the transmission, I think, has a lot to do with it.
I agree.
So the size of it, just how it behaves in the truck, and how many they need to produce. I think the 8-speed was a better choice. Also, more money. Money is important. So
Sure.
It's probably a little bit more affordable to build an 8-speed.
Yeah, so and I'm sure weight is also part of that. So all of these things factor into them not sharing across the board, which is interesting. I thought they would. The reason why I thought they would is because Nissan did something very similar. Nissan's 9-speed that they put inside the Titan, a very similar 9-speed went inside the Frontier, and when things are going well, it works great. Unfortunately, Nissan actually did have to do a couple of recalls on that transmission, but I think they sorted it by now.
I think so.
Yeah, but that's why I assumed that Toyota would do the 10-speed going from the Tundra down to the Tacoma, but they didn't. And I get it now. I mean, we've driven this thing, and in terms of its driveline, fantastic. However, very important to note, there's one issue, one that you and I agree on.
What?
That's a little bit of a weird thing that's going to take some getting used to.
Is it machismo of the exhaust system?
Pretty much. The sound. I know that the V6 doesn't sound amazing, unless, of course, you do what our friend did with his first gen, because that thing sounds like an animal.
What, like straight pipe it and supercharge it?
Right.
Yeah.
So we get it, that the 3.4, or in this case, 4 liter from the, what is it? No, the recent ones.
And the 3.5.
The 3.5.
All of them.
They don't sound great.
But they had unique sounds.
Yes.
Because I think I told this story previously, but I was hiking and there was a little country road near where I was hiking, and I heard a 4Runner, and I knew immediately it was a 4Runner because it had a 4 liter and they had that unique Toyota sound.
There is a unique sound to that engine. I agree.
And I think we lost that. This 4-cylinder turbo sounds like other 4-cylinder turbos.
It sounds like a lumpy Honda 4-cylinder from a few years ago to me.
So, yeah, so it'll still be, we need to get used to it, or maybe the aftermarket may have some answers here, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know if they can make this sound better. It certainly doesn't sound throaty. It doesn't sound macho or anything, and it certainly doesn't sound deep. So for those of you where it sound matters, sorry, that's the one complaint I think that he and I both agree on.
But Toyota is doing something else. They're doing both noise cancellation inside the cabin and also a little bit of noise enhancement inside the cabin as well. And they're doing it for the automatic transmission equipped trucks, not manual.
Yeah.
So if you have a manual, you have a different experience. We'll have to talk about that a little bit later. But I think that matters too. And it's a very quiet truck, actually.
It is a quiet truck. There are quieter out there, but there certainly are a lot of loud ones out there. I think that Toyota really did get a handle on making this truck a much more quiet and a more comfortable truck.
Yeah, and we'll have to, of course, we haven't driven the hybrid yet. Nobody has really. I mean, there is one promotional video out there. But I imagine because the current Tundra TRD Pro hybrid and Sequoia and some others that have the hybrid technology with the V6, they sound, there's a lot of augmentation going on. It almost sounds like a video game inside of those trucks when you're driving it. This does not sound like a video game. It sounds a little bit more natural. So the enhancement they're doing in this Tacoma is not that great. It's just a little bit of help.
I'm really on the fence with enhancement. I genuinely hate it. However, I do get it that you need to hear some sort of engine note and hear the gear changes for certain types of people. They just need to have that in their life. And if you were to take away that augmented sound, you may not actually even hear the engine because they've quieted the cockpit. So you don't hear any of the harsh rattles or anything else going on outside. With that being said, I think we should move on to the comfort of the vehicle because that's another place that's huge.
The front comfort is really good. I mean, they improved the seat positioning, at least for me, on the driver's side. And you?
Without a doubt. Yeah. So one of the things that the previous Tacoma had that some of us had issues with is it was actually a very small truck on the inside. If you looked at it, it was a fairly squished platform. The underside was kind of high and the roof was kind of low, which was great for appearances. It's a great looking truck, but when you're relatively tall or very tall and you get into it, what happens is your butt is almost on the floor and your legs, in some cases, are almost straight forward. Now, Toyota did address this a couple years ago by adding a power seat, which lifted you a little bit and could move you around a bit. But then again, the roof made it difficult for people who had tall torsos. So it was this weird mixed bag. The one that I owned, I was never very comfortable driving with my particular physical build. It was just an uncomfortable driving position. And other people have complained about that as well. And then when you compare it against the Nissan Frontier, which had a taller, a little bit more accommodating cab, then Toyota really started taking a couple steps further back. So what did Toyota do? They made a bigger, much more usable cab.
Yeah, and it was obvious when we put the previous gen and this new one side by side.
Oh, man.
The new one just looks larger in all, it's a little bit wider, it's a little bit taller.
Oh, yeah.
It just has bigger presence
there. It is a larger vehicle physically, especially when you put them next to each other. And then getting in and out of it is just a much more comfortable thing. Now, bear in mind that this one has, which I've never seen on a midsize truck, steps that drop down.
Power steps.
Power steps.
Yeah, this is a limited trim, which is quite expensive. I mean, it's kind of an all-in situation. I think Toyota is going after something like the GMC Canyon Denali
with this one?
With this trim because it's got the chrome. like the wheels and the grill and the bumpers, and also has some luxury features. Really nice seats, actually.
Yeah, the seats
the
are
material of the seats.
I think they're better. They feel better than the Tundra that I was just in.
Actually, yes, I
You
would
know,
agree.
I don't understand why, and maybe it's just perspective, but it really felt
I
like to
think
my
the
body.
design of the seat is a little bit different.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I was in a much more comfortable driving seating position. I had better outward view. Pretty much everything, at least from the front seats, has been vastly improved.
Yes, but the same cannot be said for the rear seat.
Correct.
I mean, it's okay. It's the rear seat cushion is not upright. I mean, it has a little bit of an angle to it, so
Which
at
is
least,
a little bit better than Nissan's, I
At
think.
least your back is a little bit, reclined.
Yeah, you're
just
not
a
sitting
tiny bit.
bolt upright. You can lean back a little bit.
But there's leg room.
It's dreadful. So if we compared it against the Ford, the recent Ford Ranger that we had, and also the
Or the
Nissan
Colorado,
Frontier,
for that matter.
or the Colorado, they're all in the same ballpark, really, in terms of backseat room. None of them have very good backseat room. However, if you want a midsize truck that has really good backseat room and a lot more elbow room, there's another vehicle out there.
Are you going to say Honda Ridgeline?
I am. And here's the thing about the Honda Ridgeline, which I know a lot of you guys love and a lot of you hate. The Ridgeline, for those people who actually need to haul human beings, is still the best in class. It just is. It's basically like driving a minivan or a crossover. It's that comfortable, and the backseat space is much more usable. We will talk about the driving differences between them a little bit later, but I just want to talk about interior. A couple points on my end to finish up with. The vehicle we were driving is a pre-production one. So if you watch the videos and you're looking at it and going, some of the little materials look a little harsh around the edges.
Or some shiny materials like plastics. Yeah.
It may not be there with the final production one. So I'm not going to talk about fit and finish because it wouldn't be fair. However, I can talk about design. And the design of the interior has a lot of interesting components to it. It does have a very nice looking screen. The infotainment system is not my favorite.
Yeah, I would agree. So first of all, it's the same new system that the Tundra uses and some other vehicles like the Sequoia and many others. They're just, as soon as the new vehicle comes out in the Toyota lineup, this new infotainment system is now multimedia.
17.7-inch screen? Or
no, not this one. That was the Blazer.
That was the Blazer. Right.
This one is 14.
14.
Still a gigantic screen.
And for a small vehicle like that, perfectly fine.
And still, I mean, there's wireless CarPlay, Android Auto, so you can hook up your phone to it. That's still great. But and here's another thing. We said we're saving towing for a little bit later, but I think Toyota can go to great lengths to improve the amount of information they communicate, the ease of use.
Right.
For example, defining trailers that you use, and how many miles you towed with each trailer. That's not very intuitive or easy to do.
No, but just simply using the audio system to turn on a rock station or a news station or something like that, you have to swing a dead cat over your head, then spread the blood of a dead chicken on the hood.
Well, you could speak to it.
But even that, it didn't always work.
You could say, "Hey, Toyota, please help me."
Yeah, it does. It does have an audio system that allows you to do that, but it still doesn't work that well. It's just not intuitive. There are so many other systems out there that are so much easier to use, and that's the thing about Toyota right now. I know they're moving into this new space of this new technology, and let's not talk about the whole thing of possible, incentives for those people who actually want to pay for service, because that is coming.
It is coming. And also driver assistance technologies. I think we have to talk about these because this new Tacoma is full of latest tech. I mean, it's got a lot of driver assistance tech as well.
Is it Safety Sense? What's the name of the system?
Yeah, Toyota Safety Sense 3.0.
Which is the first example of it.
Well, at least in the truck.
In the trucks.
At least, for the pickup truck markets. And because they have also the additional premium set of technologies on top of 3.0, which is like traffic assist, I think they call it, where it's slower speeds, like below 25 miles per hour. If you're stuck in a major traffic jam on a highway, the truck will drive itself hands-free, except your eyes still have to be on the road. So that's kind of the latest system.
Kind of defeats the whole joy of being hands-free.
But I don't know if you noticed this driving back and forth this week in the Tacoma. I turned the other piece of technology called the PDA. There's so many acronyms,
yeah.
by the way. Actually, in this particular setting, if you have no adaptive cruise setup, it will still start braking for you approaching traffic. Did you notice that?
Yes, I did.
What
And
did you think about
I
that?
didn't mind once I got used to it. At first, I was a little freaked out because I thought something
Because
was
the
wrong.
truck is doing something by itself.
Right. I didn't ask it to. I'm not in a cruise control setting. I'm just driving.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, you should slow down a little bit more. Traffic's here. Look, you slow down more before you even touch the brakes because I don't like what you're doing. So the truck has a
turn
mind
it
of
off,
its
by the
own.
way.
Yes, I know that, but at the same time, it's kind of like being married again. Whether or not you want to make the decision, someone's going to make that decision for you.
Yes.
So
And it will also keep you in the lane. It has that too.
yeah, and if you're driving with the lane keep assist system on, it will scream at you if you go out of the lane.
And so I agree with you. It took me, I don't know, a couple of slowdowns to get used to it. But then I'm like, you know what? It's not super aggressive because some systems just nail the brakes and they halt you down. This wasn't like that. So I liked that it was a little bit more gentle. And then, of course, you could turn some of these features off.
Yes.
But there's one thing I dislike. And it's not just Tacoma. It's mostly Toyota in general. It's just warnings on top of warnings on top of warnings and chimes and dings.
If you, for some reason, are not wearing your seatbelt, let's say you're on your ranch and you're moving around and you want to move the truck from A to B to C, and you just didn't put on your seatbelt for a moment just to drive from the barn to whatever, it'll start beeping, beep, 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 and then after a minute, once again, like being married, it'll start yelling at you. I kid you not. It's like bang, 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 and it won't stop. It doesn't stop after a minute, realizing for some reason this person doesn't want to put their seatbelt on. It'll just keep on going. Now, I know there's liability and a bunch of other issues.
Of course, safety, yeah.
Of course, but there's a little bit, what you're essentially doing, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're torturing the driver into putting the seatbelt on, or else that horrible sound will keep on coming. That, in my mind, is a form of torture. So there are situations. Look, I absolutely agree. Everybody must wear their seatbelt when they're on public roads and highways. But if you're in an area where it's not necessary for a particular reason, or you need to hop in and out of the vehicle doing, I don't know, farm work,
how about hooking up a trailer?
or hooking up a trailer, then having that thing scream at you sucks.
Yeah, there's one more thing. So I had the engine on in the Tacoma at the ranch.
Right.
We have tumbleweed ranch, right? And I was doing a little bit of work, but it was really cold. So I wanted the engine on, right? But my driver door was open because I was, getting some tools. I was coming in and out. And I wanted to look at the dash. I was just, testing some things. But every other second, there would be a message on my digital dash screen that said, your door is open. It was warning me that the door was, but I know the door is open. I'm standing right next to it, actually. So I would cancel it. There's a little back button. I would cancel it. It would come back on.
Exactly.
But there has to be a limit in the more modern technology. And this is a general comment. This is, Toyota, I know they want to be the safest.
Sure.
And they want to be the most, appropriate. But there must be a limit to how many warnings we have to receive.
Yeah, I almost wish that we could put some sort of moratorium on certain things and just say, hey, listen, this is what's required. You don't have to go past that.
But if I canceled the message that says the door is open,
that's what's required.
I'm telling the truck,
yes,
I'm okay. I'm canceling the message.
But Toyota goes a step further and says,
don't come back.
Toyota's like, no. I think I'm going to come back and remind you again that your damn door is open, even though you already said, yes, I know. But it's like that with other parts of the vehicle electronically as well. Okay, so regardless of let's talk about how it drives, because I know a lot of you just want to know how it drives, and I have good news for you.
Yes.
For the most part, it drives better than the vehicle it replaces, at least with city driving. Part of that has to do with the coil spring rear suspension, and it now has disc brakes all around, and it has improved its braking a little bit as well.
It does, and it also has a longer wheelbase because most pickup trucks, have longer wheelbases, and it does a couple things. It adds stability, high-speed stability. Also helps with towing. We'll talk about that later. And also, I think handling in general. I mean, you have a larger footprint of the vehicle that you're actually driving because the track width has increased a little. You could see the bulging fenders kind of in the front and in the rear. The wheels are actually a little bit wider.
Yeah, they stand out a little bit further. Now, there are a couple things to keep in mind with that, and this is a trend that a lot of automakers are going through, and that is you may not be quite as maneuverable as the vehicle you formerly drove. Now, we did not have a chance to really go and test.
Be scientific about it.
Yeah, but I can tell you that it didn't feel that much different in terms of fitting it into a parking space. It did just fine. It's still smaller than a full-size truck, but at the same time, steering was a little bit more communicative than I expected. I thought it would be lighter and less precise. It wasn't. It actually was quite good. I thought better than the truck it replaced, and that's important. But the ride was a little tighter than I expected.
A little bit stiffer than you expected?
A little bit.
So I think I have an explanation for this.
Yeah, hit me.
Because I actually put this truck on the scales. Mm-hmm. That's what we do.
That's what we do. We weigh things.
Yeah, we weigh things. We try to be as precise as possible, especially with the pre-production vehicle like this.
Right.
We may not have all the final data, right? So this limited Tacoma with all the bells and whistles, because we talked about a lot of bells, nice interior and sunroof, and it weighs 4,800 pounds.
Okay.
Which sounds super high, but it's actually under 5,000 pounds, which I was pleased with.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a little getting on the heavier side, but it still had, according to the overall gross vehicle weight rating, 1,500 pounds of payload. So they jammed a lot of payload into this puppy, which is great.
So do you think they did it by tightening the springs?
Yeah, which makes the spring a little bit stiffer, I believe, because they do want to carry more weight. So if you put your family in it or carry, I don't know, a topper on the back with some gear or some other, or towing a trailer, I think this truck would be more comfortable when it's loaded.
If you recall, the Tacoma's never been the ace of towing. You know what I mean?
It's not supposed to be.
No. In the past, I've noticed that even with light loads, you'll see a Tacoma sagging its butt. And that's because they're in many cases, they're off-road versions. They're softly sprung for off-roading, and they're just not really up to holding, a trailer at level. I think that this one, though, with its tighter springs and its higher rating, probably will tow a little bit better, at least being physically a little bit more level without any help, without helper springs or anything like that. I think that it was one of the things that Toyota was aiming for, which is why I think that this one does have a slightly tighter ride. That and also larger wheels and those tires that are on there, by the way, are street tires. So
and they could be kind of stiff as well
exactly.
for efficiency and other reasons.
Precise mundo.
So, by the way, this truck was efficient. We talked about our loops, chin and no chin. We got a little bit over 24 mpg on our highway loop, which is basically based on the Denver 100 circular highway.
Yeah, but that was with 3 people in the cab and a little bit of payload.
Yeah, so I would say this is really good real-world results. I cannot wait for the hybrid. I think the hybrid could have additional improvements.
It would be interesting to see. I'm curious too.
So overall, I'm pleased with the ride, and I'm also pleased with the additional payload because I've been kind of harping on this over the years. Because, for example, the third generation white Tacoma that we tested the drag racer against had under 1,000 pounds of payload, which means 4 of us would basically max it out.
Yep.
So that's what we've been talking about, because a lot of people love. What do people love doing with Tacomas?
Well, they like overriding with them, overlanding. Overriding?
Well, they put bed racks. They put tents on top of it.
Oh yeah.
They put those bike racks that stick out like a mile behind the truck.
Right.
So all those things add leverage and weight, and this truck I think will handle that better than any Tacoma before.
Yeah, I really do think that Toyota was thinking about that when they designed these trucks. Also, the overall ride felt a little bit more solid. Now, what I mean by that is that when you drive a Tacoma, an older one, there's a little bit of a loosey-goosey when you're like going through a little bit of a twist up and over into a driveway or into a parking lot or over a manhole cover or two. This felt a lot more stable. I can't speak today. Stable.
It's the holiday season.
Thank you. Sorry, too much nog. So I have a theory about that as well. Fully boxed frame. I think that makes the vehicle feel a little bit more connected and a little bit more solid underneath you. So it's more bulk, but at the same time, it really does feel connected. So there's sort of a pro and con to this. But I want to go out on a limb and say that this is one of the, A, it's the best handling Tacoma I've ever driven, but B, I think it's competitive with many of the trucks that are out there right now that are new to the market, including the Chevy Colorado. And I think it's now time for us to start comparing it to the other trucks we've driven.
Yeah, we did a little bit already. But I think we need to dig deeper. And I'll just say before we move on, you mentioned the frame, and that adds weight lower, in the chassis, which makes it a little bit more stable as well.
Yeah, because it's taking away the weight from the roof and bringing it down to the floor essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I want to say something else before we really dig into the competition a little bit more. A lot of reviewers out there called the new Tacoma the mini Tundra, which is kind of a compliment, right?
Yeah.
But I want to flip it on its head a little bit.
Okay.
And I know the Tacoma came out after the Tundra, of course, but I want to call the Tundra the large Tacoma now.
Okay.
So I want to flip it because, in my opinion, the Tacoma is better executed overall as a holistic.
I agree 100% there.
So calling it a mini Tundra,
You're saying it's demeaning.
It's a little bit demeaning,
in
my view. This is just my personal thing, my personal take. So I love both trucks. The Tundra is really great at towing, for example. But I'm gonna start calling the Tundra the huge Tacoma.
Fair enough. I mean,
how about that?
You are an expert in your field, my friend. So if you're going to call it that, then I'm going to agree.
And this is our podcast. We can say
whatever we want. Yeah, and we're not even editing ourselves. Yeah. People ask us to do that more often than not. Okay, but here's a point that's very interesting. If you look at the Tacoma and the Tundra side by side, they have some similarities in terms of their powertrain as well. And this is what I mean. There's an absolute base version of the Tundra, which has the weakest sauce out of all of the Tundras in terms of its powertrain. And then you go to the mid-level one, and then you've got the hybrid.
Yes.
Well, guess what? You have the exact same thing with the Tacoma as well, just with 2 cylinders less.
Yep.
Right?
You have a work version of it, you have the standard version of it, and of course the hybrid is coming.
Now, technically what we were driving was the standard version, meaning that the powertrain was probably going to be the more popular powertrain, I would imagine, throughout a majority of the trucks that are sold, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's going to be the meat of their market.
Right. So that performance, when you pair it against the Ford Ranger that we recently had, which we really wish we had right now, and also the Chevy Colorado, those are the other two that are currently turbocharged with 4 cylinders. It isn't the fastest.
No, and that's surprised me a bit. Not surprised me a bit, but disappointed me a bit. Because I'm pulling up the Chevy Colorado, right?
Right.
So what happened with the Chevy Colorado, of course, it's a brand new chassis, all new truck in 2023, and now 2024 ones are coming online right now. They also made the wheelbase a little bit larger. I mean, same recipe. I mean, very similar recipe.
They're similar. There are differences,
of course. Of course, actually...
You only get the 4-door with the Colorado. You can still get a
shorter cab with
Toyota.
With a Tacoma, and you can get a longer bed with the Tacoma. So, of course, there's many intricacies of each, but the overall, I would say, kind of philosophy was similar. Make it more stable, make it a little bit more capable, more fun, right? Extend the wheelbase. With the extended wheelbase, though, you mentioned maneuverability. I think both suffer, the new Colorado and the new Tacoma, both suffer with turning circle.
Yeah, tight radius circles.
And I think it's obvious for a person who's not used to a pickup. And I say this because over this holiday break, over Christmas, my wife was driving my truck, my Colorado, and she commented to me, she said, boy, this truck turns wide. And she's talking about the Colorado. She's not a truck person. She drives a mini BMW i3 that can turn within this room.
Seriously, it has a super size. Yeah.
So she commented on it, and I agree. These trucks, the wheels don't cut in quite enough. You know what I'm saying? And
they have an extended wheelbase over what they were before.
Yes.
And Toyotas have always been notorious about having a really wide turning radius, especially the Tacoma. So by stretching that wheelbase even further, that can affect it. However, I would imagine that they tried to compensate in some way. So it's possible that perhaps the steering angle may have increased a little bit. But honestly, in terms of tight radius turns, I didn't notice that much of a difference personally. but I get where she's coming from. And yeah, in general, they do have wide turning radiuses.
And so, and the real difference with the Colorado, as you guys may have seen in the drag race, because we already published it, like we said, is the Colorado engine is way more torque, way more power, actually, and usable power. And it was obvious when you see them side by side. My Chevy Colorado, which is actually an off-road version, the Trail Boss, just walked away. I mean, it was really obvious what was happening.
Despite the extra bulk of having their larger, beefier tires and everything else, and the Toyota was running on street tires, which should have given it a slight advantage with traction. The Colorado was definitely a monster to compete against, and that should change.
And I'm sure Toyota is right now typing and saying, wait till the hybrid.
Yep.
I'm sure that's happening. And yes, we will. We will test the hybrid.
How soon until we start hearing about the hybrid, would you say?
Well, they're saying April to May is the actual delivery to customers, which means we have to wait to April probably to drive it.
Okay.
So we'll have to wait few more months still.
Now, in terms of, once again, we're comparing now. The Jeep Gladiator is another vehicle we have a long history with. And we've driven every version. So we've driven the diesel, and obviously we've driven a lot of the naturally aspirated Pentastar V6. Both stick and automatic, and it also has an 8-speed automatic transmission. Probably the preferable and probably much higher selling version of that truck too. It won't compete speed-wise. Forget it. It's slow. It won't compete with the Tacoma with its Turbo 4, or obviously the Colorado with its Turbo 4. So if you're talking about street racing, it ain't the fastest.
Okay, I think we need to address this elephant as well.
Yes.
I saw some comments from you guys saying, why are you drag racing pickups? Yes, fun. So it is fun. Yes, that's fun. Why. And also, bragging rights, fun. But also, we understand, of course, most people don't walk into any dealership, and say, I want to buy a pickup truck. Tell me about its quarter-mile performance right now. I don't think anybody says that.
I don't know.
But it's fun.
It's fun, but there's something else. I grew up in Los Angeles, right? And in many cases, when you're on the freeway on-ramp, there's a place for you and then the person, next to you.
Are you talking about those metered on-ramps with lights?
Right. And so basically, each time that light turns green, it is a drag race to see which one gets the lane first to get on the freeway. Also,
it's a real-world drag race.
It is a real-world drag race. And I truly believe that. I really do like getting in front of the guy next to me, especially if you go behind someone who's slow. That sucks. And then in addition, having good speed to get up and onto that freeway and merge. Remember, it's not up to the people on the freeway to let you in. It's up to you to get in. And as far as they're concerned, you're just a fly. You're bothersome. But if you're flying on there at a good rate of speed and you're equaling their speed and merging on, then you're no longer a bother. You're just another person getting on the freeway. And there are certain vehicles out there that are remarkably slow and, frankly, are a bother to get on the freeway. So, going back to the thing about us drag racing them, yes, it is important for us to know how they perform. Also, it's important to know how they perform up here at high elevation, because if they do well here, imagine how they'll do in your city, right?
Yeah, totally.
So, with that being said, we know that both the Jeep and, of course, the Honda Ridgeline both have V6 engines. In fact, that's all they come with now. The Honda, I think, is now a 9-speed, or do they move to the 10-speed?
Yeah,
I think it's still a 9-speed.
Yeah, so it's similar to the Frontier in some ways.
Yeah, it's similar in terms of displacement, but I mean, it's a completely different vehicle. It's front-wheel drive bias, and it's and then of course the Frontier. So it's interesting. You now have half the world with Turbo 4s, and then half the world with these V6s. And how many of them will adopt the smaller displacement turbocharged engines? Well, we are hearing rumors, but we don't know anything for sure.
Well, so let's look at Honda just really quick.
Yes,
so
please.
The new Pilot is out.
Yep.
And it's dramatically improved vehicle, I think. They have actually a slightly lifted Trail Sport version that's kind of beefy, but they kept the same engine, didn't they?
Yep.
So I think Honda is still being very pragmatic. I think they're going to continue, at least in the near future, with their V6 engines.
Yep.
Or will they ever do a hybrid Ridgeline, do you think?
That's the funny thing. Now, I've approached Honda more than once about this, and they like to smile when I ask stupid questions. They smile at me a lot. And obviously, they're looking at that because, remember, with half-ton trucks even full-size trucks, that's all part of the EPA scale. And in order for them to maintain good scores with CAFE numbers, they do need to make sure their vehicles are getting good mileage. Now, currently their V6s are not that efficient, but they're relatively efficient. And for them to maintain profits, they're starting to move towards electrification in some vehicles. And now they're starting to look a little bit down the line towards doing more hybrids. And Honda does a really good hybrid. Their Honda Accord hybrid is extraordinarily efficient. I know we're talking trucks, so that's all I'm going to say. However, that powertrain, if you look at the numbers and what it produces, there's no reason why that can't go inside of something like a Ridgeline. However, there's a problem.
What?
Power to the rear wheels. Suddenly everything changes. Now, I bet you're saying, wait a minute, doesn't the CR-V have a hybrid version as well?
Yeah, doesn't it?
It's not that powerful, though, and I don't think it would work well in the Ridgeline. In order to have the Ridgeline competitive with the other trucks that are hybrids or will be hybrids or turbos, you're going to need a lot more power. So that's where Honda's probably looking next, is to find a way to make that proposition more powerful and more efficient than the current V6, because the best way to sell it is saying not only does it put out more power, but it gets better mileage. And for them to do that, they really have to jump a few hurdles. So I think for the next couple of years, we're still with the V6, with the Ridgeline. But I got to tell you, the Ridgeline is the smoothest of all the trucks we've mentioned in terms of highway drive, overall comfort. It's easy to park. It's
quiet.
Very easy to live with. And it's comfortable.
Yeah.
So it does a lot of things really well, but it's not a full-on truck.
Yeah, it's really doesn't quite feel as, it's not body and frame, and it has a subframe.
It does have a subframe.
But it has that crossover SUV feeling.
Precisely.
You forget you have a bed behind you, really,
right,
when you drive a Ridgeline.
And I drive its little cousin, the Santa Cruz, and I got to tell you, it's basically like driving a crossover. The best thing about it is I can throw the keys to my wife, and I know for a fact that even though she'll run over curbs and do other things, it'll be fine. And she's basically driving a crossover, so it's easier enough to park and load up and all that other stuff.
Yeah, totally.
So moving on to the Ranger.
Yeah, so I do have a picture of the current, not the all-new Ranger or the updated Ranger, but the current 2023 Ranger. And the reason is because, yes, even though we showed you the debut of the new Ranger is not on sale yet here in the U.S.
No, everything's been pushed back.
Yeah, but I got to say, so the current Ranger, 2019 through now, we've owned one actually for several months, half a year. We had I think it was a 2019 that we bought used.
It was a 19.
And then we sold it, of course. But comfort was great. Do you like comfort of the Ranger or no?
It's the Toyota's better. The Toyota has a more
the new
yeah,
Toyota?
The new Tacoma has a better interior. The Ford drove
I'm talking
quiet.
about like the seat.
The seats were fine.
Yeah,
the seats were fine. I would say that for long distance driving, and we did take one from California to Boulder, and then in between, off-roading and all that, and it was great. The seating was fine, but all the components on the inside were not designed for comfort. They were hard plastics that were sharp.
Oh, yes.
If you recall.
And the older design dash and all that stuff.
It really felt like you're stepping back in time. So that's where the new Tacoma has the edge. However, in terms of being quiet, that was one of the quietest trucks I've driven.
Yes. And like we said, we've towed with one many times, and it's really also a remarkable towing machine.
It didn't care.
And also on paper, remarkable, because the Ranger is rated at 7,500 pounds. The new Tacoma is between 6,400 and 6,500 pounds. So this is one thing Toyota did not do. They did not go chasing those claims.
Which may have been a smart idea. I'm not 100% sure where Toyota's mind is on this, but essentially, I can never understand when someone says, I'll settle for the middle. And that's exactly what they did.
Well, we saw what happened to the Titan when they said that.
I know.
The Titan is being discontinued. But I think Toyota is in a different position. They have a position of strength.
Yeah.
They're the best-selling midsize pickup in the country.
I think they'll continue that too.
And they're improving certain elements that they need to improve, and I think they'll be fine.
Yes.
From their standpoint.
So Toyota and Nissan are almost in a dead heat when it comes to towing, and payload to a lesser extent, I would say. They're pretty close. But if you look at the Ford totally outtows it.
And also the Colorado is over, same rating, 7,700 pounds.
What about the Jeep?
Also, the latest ones are also rated at 7,700 pounds. So once again, the Gladiator and the Colorado and the Canyon, 7,700 pounds. That's kind of that's the bar, right? That's the top. And then Ford Ranger is a little bit lower at 7,500 pounds, but you're talking about 200 pounds.
So that's
it's about the same.
I would say it's competitive.
It's about the same. Then, of course, we have the Frontier
and the
the Tacoma,
right,
at about 6,400 pounds ish.
And then the only thing underneath it is the Ridgeline, which is 5,000 pounds,
yes.
I believe. Ironically, some of the little baby trucks out there are pretty close to 5,000 pounds if you get them.
Including the Santa Cruz.
Yeah,
turbo.
the Santa Cruz is equivalent if you get the turbo. But there's a point here to be made, and that is that many of you are already yelling at the screen or in your car yelling at us saying this. I'm not buying it to tow as much as a half-ton truck. We get it.
Yes.
But on paper, for some people, it does matter whether or not you are winning the towing game or not. And in this case, Toyota's not. But in exchange with that, they've managed to build a truck that I think is competitive in every other way that's out there.
Including real-world efficiency.
Yep.
Because even though I kind of like the seats in the Ranger, and I think the new one is even the same or better. I've sat in the new Ranger as well. I love the way the current Ranger tows. I think the Tremor specifically, the Ranger Tremor is wonderful off-road.
Yep.
And the new Raptor is coming.
Yep.
Ranger Raptor. Those things are all great. But the Tacoma has now, reset the bar in many different ways, including efficiency, because we never got what EPA says on the Ranger. Never.
Yeah, the Ranger just hasn't been quite as efficient. That was the only, really, other than the interior materials, that was the only other thing that Andre and I agreed on, which was a bit of a disappointment, was that its numbers didn't even come close to matching what the EPA was stating. Also, what the truck was stating at one point, but that's a whole different story right there.
Yeah.
And then there's the Jeep again. And the Gladiator, I really hate competing with the Gladiator in this realm because the Gladiator isn't that great of a pickup truck, but it's a very good off-road pickup truck.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
It's amazing off-road if you get the right trim. Even the base trim is pretty decent because you still get four-wheel drive standard and you get the cab standard and you get the bed length. All that is standard with it. But it's just not quite as capable as the other ones as a pickup truck. And then as a Jeep, well, frankly, then a regular Wrangler is far, far better. So it's in this weird ether of its own. However, it can tow a lot, but it's not great to tow with.
No.
Isn't that a good way to put it?
No. Yeah, we have to say this, right? Even though the number says 7,700 pounds, we've did the iGauntlet with it, and we've done other testing with the Gladiator. We owned one for actually over a year.
Yep, we did.
And it's a screamer. That V6 needs to scream to make its power. It doesn't feel like it's relaxed or comfortable.
Right.
I wouldn't tow near this limit in the Jeep. I would, and I did tow near the limit with the Ranger.
Oh, yeah.
And the Colorado. And I would, I think, tow at the limit with the Tacoma. Of course, we still need to do it.
I would say the Frontier should be in that as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, the Frontier.
It tows really
even
well.
Even though it still has a naturally aspirated V6, somehow it doesn't feel as strained as the Jeep.
No, they really dialed it in well.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the unsung hero amongst all these trucks because it is also one of the least expensive trucks if you want to get a 4x4 with its king cab configuration. You can look that up later on. But it just doesn't quite have the gravitas of some of these other ones, especially the Tacoma, in terms of how many people buy them. But I think that this year may change things. As we're rounding out this show, I think you guys will agree that right now pickup trucks are remarkably expensive. And we thought the prices might come down a hair, but haven't really seen much of that.
And the new Tacoma is more expensive.
Yep.
I mean, it's almost $3,000 more expensive than the previous generation
That was
truck.
just ridiculous.
And a lot of you, we read your comments, we understand, and we are feeling it because we're buying one too.
Yep, that's exactly it. We're expecting it pretty soon.
But let's talk about price a little bit because we recently did the 2024 GM pickup truck pricing because the Colorado price came out, and also the GMC Canyon prices came out. And I got to tell you, even though the Colorado also has 4 doors and a short bed, and 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive, the Colorado is still less expensive than the Tacoma.
But a fair margin,
By
too.
$1,900.
I mean,
that's a good chunk of change
That
right
is
there.
a really good chunk of change.
Yeah.
And I would say that's pretty close to what the Frontier's doing as well.
Yeah.
It undercuts it as well.
Yeah.
So, the reality is you're buying the Tacoma because you're buying a Tacoma as opposed
Because
to...
you're buying the name, really. You are buying the name.
Yeah. So what about manual transmissions before we wrap up? Guess what?
I'm thankful Tacoma still has it.
I'm thrilled that they still do.
Yeah.
However, there are a couple things. It is trim dependent, so certain trims that you cannot get it, and you cannot get it with the hybrid powertrain that's coming out soon. That one will not allow manual transmission. The only other vehicle you can buy that's currently being built that has a manual transmission option is, once again, the Jeep Gladiator.
Bam.
That's it. Yeah.
And I spent limited time with the manual Tacoma, the new one, because I really did want to feel it. I drove it in California for under an hour. You know what it felt like? It almost felt like driving a diesel big pickup because it's not a diesel. But here's what it is. The manual transmission Tacoma has an RPM limit that's lower at about 5,400 RPM instead of 60 or 6,100 in the other one. And the gears are kind of close together. So to start off in the new Tacoma, you almost could start in second gear because the first gear is pretty kind of low. It's mostly for like off-road.
Granny gear.
Not quite a granny gear, but getting towards that space.
Okay.
And then the second gear is pretty. The shifts are pretty tight and nice, but it almost felt like you had the short shift, first, second, third, to get going, which makes it kind of fun. You're really involved in the experience and you're driving it, grabbing it by the scruff. But I felt like it almost had that diesel quality that you don't have a lot of RPM.
Yeah, it's going to cut you off at 5,500, you say?
54.
5,400.
Yeah.
Does it have the same reverse setup as before? Because I didn't like, that was one thing I really didn't like about the Tacoma's manual transmission, is that it was easy to accidentally go into reverse.
I did go in reverse, and I didn't feel really, it felt pretty good. But we need more testing, I would
We need
say.
more testing. And another piece of good news is that Andre actually tested the very base model of the Tacoma, which is something rare. They always give us, one that is just filled with glitz
like this red
and stuff.
one we showed you.
Yeah, this red one. Now, how much was this red one?
$54,000. 54.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
Yeah, so that is a lot of dough for a mid-size truck. Hell, it's a lot of dough for a full-size truck. But the reality is that every other truck that we just mentioned, you can easily get it up to that price as well. If you get the Pro 4X version of the Nissan and you slap on some stuff, you can hit the $50,000 range. If you get the Jeep, you can easily go well over $50,000 into almost $60,000 range.
Oh my gosh, remember that far-out diesel commemorative edition Gladiator?
Launch edition or something like that. No,
the
other one.
The final one. $71,000 that Jeep was, the Gladiator.
Yeah. So the reality is that, yes, these prices, and unfortunately, guys, here's a dose of reality. These prices are not coming down anytime soon. In fact, because of everything that's happened between the UAW and all the stuff that you guys have been waiting for, I think prices are going to go up even more. So prepare for that.
So yeah, the only thing you can do to get a great deal, well, first of all, end of year, right now.
Right now.
You may have some wiggle room in some. We're not talking about Tacomas. Tacomas are always hot.
No, they're never going to have a lot full of them.
But if you do see a pickup truck, for example, like a Ram 1500, that's about to be renewed next year.
Right.
And some of them, if they're sitting on the lot, the dealer wants to move them. So that's when you can jump on it and get some good deals. I was just looking at our local dealership, Johnson Auto Plaza in Brighton. And yeah, some of these, current Ram 1500s have been sitting for a couple of weeks, maybe 3 or 4 weeks. There are discounts, sizable discounts on those trucks.
Ford Rangers, if you can find one, they're probably going to be discounted. Yeah, good luck finding one. But if you do find one, they'll probably be discounted. I've been hearing that Jeep is finally back to MSRP, and in some cases, I'm hearing stories of going under that.
Yeah.
Nissan's the same. They're right now, they have lots with plenty of trucks. You have to find them, but they're there, and they're also at, if not slightly under MSRP, and there's also some fairly good deals that can be had. So they're still out there. They're still available. But my warning is, in time, prices are just going to continue to increase.
Also, what I noticed with the Gladiator, since we were wrapping up the show as well, they bought dealers, and the factory produced a lot of manual transmission during COVID.
Yeah.
There was some chip shortages and things going on.
It was easier for them to build a manual.
So sometimes, it was easier for them. And now some of those manual trucks are still sitting. So if you are a manual transmission enthusiast, bam, you can get a deal on one because they're sitting there. You could swoop in and get it.
That is mighty tempting. You know, that was one of the trucks I was looking at originally, the bare bones manual transmission.
Except a year and a half ago when you were looking, it was hotness.
Yeah.
It was COVID time.
Yeah. Things have changed significantly. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I know this was all laden with Toyota stuff. I promise you the next one won't be.
We have to follow the news.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You guys have been asking questions. We're answering those questions with this new Tacoma. But there's a lot more Tacoma videos to come in the future, including us acquiring our brand new Tacoma, which is right around the corner.
Yeah, which should include the road trip. It should include snow off-roading, actual other real off-roading.
Right.
Maybe even Moab. And, of course, towing. That's what we really want to do.
Absolutely. So thank you for joining us. If you have any comments, please leave them down below. We do read our comments as often as we can. And also, if you want your questions directly answered, Patreon is the way to do it.
Patreon.com/TFLcar. And actually, you can just ask your question or state a comment in the chat room here at Patreon. Because William Wallace was wondering, how do I ask a question? Well, just put it right there in the chat room.
And scream freedom really loud.
Freedom.
It's a really cool name, William Wallace.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
We'll see you next time.